Hey boys, don't put away your hockey sticks for your golf clubs. Lefleur's here.
Hey everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you, not just to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History, but actually, can you believe this, our 100th episode. I can't believe that the lights are still on with this show. But as I've always maintained, I really appreciate the viewers who put up with my very basic podcast, so to speak. And really a shout out to Park Ridge citizens, the residents, the sports fans, and of course, the producer and mentor, and really a big help for me on this show, Howard Fredericks. Howard always lends an ear, and he always offers some advice and always does an expert job of putting this together and making it somewhat of an interesting show for the viewers at home. And this week, I really wanted to concentrate on some fun stuff, but I also want to cover some great, some disappointing news as well. And that is with the death of Guy Lefleur, who becomes really, in my mind, one of the second great players from the 80s and 70s who pass over the last 2 weeks. And both of them were really part of a dynasty during those late 70s, early 80s. Of course, Guy Lefleur, we're going to spend some time talking about Guy Lefleur. He was an anchor, probably the catalyst, probably the most important player, if not the most valuable player for the Montreal Canadiens under the coaching expertise of Scotty Bowman, that won 4 Stanley Cups during the 70s. I do like hockey. I usually follow it during the Stanley Cup. I usually root for the traditional teams, the original 6, although I never rooted for the Canadiens. I never really rooted for the Boston Bruins either, I have to be honest. And I never really rooted for the Rangers except to make the playoffs, because during the 80s, they had some great series with the Islanders, always coming up short with the Islanders, but nonetheless, always scintillating playoff games. The reason why I remember the Islanders a little bit more, I can remember a number of their players, and I do remember this. Probably I followed them for 2 reasons. One is in 1980, the United States Olympic team won that unbelievable gold medal, beating the Russians, then the Finns to win and capture the gold medal. And then on that team, probably the guy who stands out the most, Jim Craig, their goalie, goes on and plays for Atlanta, the Atlanta Flames. But they also had a defensive player who was the only one with a beard during the Olympics, and that was Ken Morrow. And I always thought it was really cool. He went from winning the Olympics to going to the Islanders and winning 4 straight Stanley Cup titles. I mean, I don't know whether that was, I think that's probably unprecedented, because I can't think of, 1960, the Olympians won the Stanley Cup, but I can't recall any Olympic player, I'm probably wrong, who would go on from that amateur team, go right into the pros that same year, and then win 4 titles in a row. First of all, it didn't happen in the 60s that way, because Detroit, Toronto, and Montreal were really going back and forth, sharing that. Oh, and also the Blackhawks in 63. So I don't think it was possible then. So that's why I always thought Ken Morrow was quite an interesting player from that team. And so I was watching the Islanders. But I did watch, of course, the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I do want to get to that Stanley Cup dynasty team that was the Canadiens. Now, first of all, let me just say this. I didn't know really a hill of beans about Guy Lefleur, other than the fact I knew he was not just a good player, and I knew that he just wasn't a great player. I knew that he was a Hall of Fame and was integral on those Canadian Stanley Cup titles. And I was just doing a little bit of research on him, courtesy of Hockey Reference, and of course a little bit of Wikipedia and NHL history. I did not realize this. I'm just going to do a bullet. Lefleur is still the all-time leading scorer in Canadian history. Did not know that. He has 1,246 points. And the club's second highest was Maurice Rocket Richard, who's the all-time goal leader with 518. And wait a minute, he made up the club's second highest all-time goals with 518. He is behind Maurice Richard in that respect. And he has the most all-time assists with 728 in 14 years with the Habs or the Canadiens. He led the NHL in points in 76, 77, and 78. Pretty remarkable. And did not realize this. The Canadian record he still shares with Steve Shutt for most goals in a season with 60. And he did that during that unbelievable trifecta, 76, 77, and 78. He did it in his last year, 77 and 78. And he holds the franchise record for points in a season with 136. And then he became the first player in NHL history to score at least 50 goals and 100 points in 6 consecutive seasons. It's pretty amazing. And then, of course, he did set a record for most points. First one to 1,000 points in the fewest games. He made 1,000 points in only 720 games, but that was surpassed by Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux and a few others, as the record indicates. The other thing, too, I didn't realize is the number of Canadians who have their jersey. At the time that Guy Lefleur's jersey was retired, there had only been 4 other Canadians. But since then, ready for this? This is incredible. Jacques Plante, number 1. Doug Harvey, number 2. Jean Bellevue, 4. Bernard Geoffron, I think he's Boom Boom Geoffron, 5. Howie Morenz, number 7. Maurice Richard, number 9. Guy Lafleur's 10. The 12 worn by Dickie Moore and Yvon Cournoyer. I know him very well because he was a tremendous force on that 71 team. Henry Richard, 16. Sergei Savard, 18. Larry Robinson, 19. He was on those great teams of the Canadiens in the 70s and, of course, would lead the Devils to a championship. Bob Gainey, number 23. Ken Dryden, number 29. And Patrick Roy, 33, are all hanging above the ice. That's amazing. Now, of those, I do remember Ken Dryden. In fact, by the way, I'm going to get you some pictures. Dryden is the guy who stands out for me. And, of course, well, first of all, let me get Guy Lafleur. When I was looking up cards, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't find any of the Canadiens with white jerseys. Pretty interesting, and I'll tell you why. I actually like the white jersey of the Canadiens better than I do the red jerseys. The white was a different white. It was, I'm telling you, it was a really bright white. And as a kid and seeing games at the Montreal Forum, when I would watch them, sometimes they were shown on Channel 4. Remember when NBC used to have the NHL Sunday Game of the Week? And the lighting at the Forum was so bright, I felt. And it always looked like the Canadiens. That's when the teams wore home whites. And this is 70s and 80s. And the Canadiens, I don't know what it is, their white jerseys really were stunning to look at. The Canadiens' red ones, these look, why I like them so much, though, the red ones, I will tell you this, is that don't they give off, still to this day, like that 1940s, 1950s look? Hasn't really changed, so I do like that. And, of course, this is Guy Lafleur with a Topps card. I do have this, the back. These are great by Topps. I'm going to read this to you. This is obviously a 1976 card, and it said Guy Lafleur, center. And it even has it in French, center, being spelled C-E-N-T-R-E. Anyway, it says Montreal's top scorer last season and the 4th high scorer in the NHL. Twice scored more than 100 goals as an amateur. And then it has it in French underneath it. I am not about to read it in French. I know I will just destroy it. But you can see there's a great cartoon. Him with the picture Down here, he's kissing his hockey stick. Pretty interesting. I just love it. Here is some of the players I was talking about. Oh, and Frank Mahovlich. Everybody knows why. Frank Mahovlich, not one of my favorite players of all time. He was involved in Game 7, 1971, Blackhawks, Canadiens, Game 7, Stanley Cup Finals, and he had one of the big goals in that 3-2 win by the Canadiens, who scored late in that game. I think they scored, midway through the third period. I consider that late because now you're holding on to threads, hoping that you can hold them off. But there's Frank Mahovlich down there. And, of course, these are some of the players from those great Canadian teams. Yvonne Cournoyer, I believe that's how you pronounce it. I just remember it was a pretty cool name. I don't know. As a kid, it always sounded like a French dish instead of a player. But he was an outstanding player. I just want to give you this. Ready for this? I was just doing a little statistical breakdown of Guy Lefleur and his teams. Now, they won 4 Stanley Cups. During that time, they won 48 Stanley Cup playoff games during that 4-year run. They only lost 10 games. They beat the Flyers, the Bruins twice, and the Rangers. I do remember all 3 of the 4 I do remember. The one Bruin year, I remember when they, I think they beat them 4-1, and it wasn't even that close. And those Bruin teams had Brad Park, a couple of other ex-Rangers, Jean Rattel, I do believe, played on those teams. Remember, there was a big trade between the Rangers and the Boston Bruins that landed for the Rangers anyway, Phil Esposito. They thought that they were, and actually, to a certain extent, it was successful because Esposito does lead them to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1979. And they had been there. They lost, of course, after winning the first game over the Canadiens with John Davidson in the pipes. But that team, I was just looking. Overall, ready for this, he made 8 All-Star teams, 5 as a starter, nominated for the Sportsmanship, which is the Lady Big. Got that 9 times. He won the MVP, which was the Hart Trophy, twice. And he also won this, the Lester Person, or was nominated anyway, for Most Outstanding Player by the NHL Players Association. So there was a nuance there, MVP as opposed to Most Outstanding Player. And, of course, one was given by the Players Association, the union, as opposed to the writers giving the Hart Award, or at least the league, through the writers. And I was looking at this. There's only 2 other players that have won more Hart trophies, Gretzky and Lemieux. 5 for Gretzky, 4 for Lemieux. Of course, Lefleur is tied with, ready for this, guys like Yager, Crosby, Ovechkin, and Connor McDavid. He's an elite player. He really is an elite player. What I thought was most interesting about him was that the number of coaches he played for that had a B either in their first or last name. He played for the great Scotty Bowman. Of course, Bowman was the one who led them to so many championships with the with the Montreal Canadiens. Then he played for Bernie Boom Boom Joffrin, who was replaced by Claude Réal. But then he was replaced by Bob Berry, who was replaced by Jacques Lemaire. And I do believe Lemaire leads the Devils to a Stanley Cup as well. And then Lemaire is replaced by Mike. Well, then he retires and comes back, Lemieux. And I didn't realize this. Played for the Rangers in '89. And he played for a coach by the name of Mike Bergeron, who was replaced by Phil Esposito. But interestingly enough, he goes to Quebec. And who is the coach up there? But it is Mike Bergeron, who is replaced by Dave Chambers. So look at all the B's that he played for. Bowman, Bernie, Berry, Bergeron, and Bergeron again his last year in the league with Quebec. Just something that's interesting to me. Teams that, he lost to the Rangers twice. in the playoffs. And he lost to the Quebec Nordiques and twice. And, of course, they lost to the Islanders in 84 when the Islanders would go on and lose to the Edmonton Oilers. And then Edmonton would begin their run. I think they won 3 in 4 years. Just a really interesting player. On those teams, I made photographs because I won. This, without a doubt, still to this day, I don't understand why he's not seen. And, of course, you hockey pundits out there, you experts will tell me why. But nobody ever talks about Kenny Dryden, who had come up. Do you realize he was the MVP of the Stanley Cup playoffs in 1971? And then the following year, he won the Rookie of the Year. And that's the only, to this, in my mind, I believe that's the only NHL player to have ever done that. What happened was 1971, it just sticks out for me really quite a bit. I did follow hockey a lot in 71. But in 1971, he comes out of Cornell, left Cornell, and the Canadiens promote him right to, the major league team, the Canadiens. And he basically inspires with great play the Canadiens to the Stanley Cup. I do believe what happened was they were in a transition. They were struggling with their goaltending. He's at Cornell. He only played 10 years in the league. And I know that in past shows, don't ask me to tell you what episode. It might be 75, it might be 83, it might have been number 19. But he was a lawyer. He only played like 10 years in the league. And he won he won an ungodly number of championships. I want to say he won like 7 because he came up in 71. And I think he might have been the goaltender during those great Canadians in the mid-70s. So I'm going to say he won like 7 times in 10 years. Here's another picture of Ken Dryden without the mask. And I apologize. That's the one thing that's a problem with hockey players. Sometimes you can't see their faces. Just take a look at his mask, though, and really how primitive that is as opposed to what they're wearing today, and justifiably so, because the hockey puck is coming at you at bullet speed. And these guys as they say, between the pipes in the goaltending, boy, oh boy, they must take a lot of bruising, much like a catcher in baseball. So many aches and pains that they must go through. Here is another picture of Guy Lefleur as both a Ranger and a Nordique. I do like the Nordique's uniform. I don't know what it is about that blue. I really do like it. And I think what I like, the red is really cool. It really stands out against that light blue background. Never really liked the Rangers uniform. One reason why, as a cartoonist, I could never spell the Rangers all the way down without bunching up some of the letters. So I always struggle with that. But I guess I like these better. Remember, we had the Statue of Liberty. Then they had the Ranger logo. I guess I like this because it's more traditional. Some of the other players on those great Canadian teams. Larry Robinson. Now, don't know a hill of beans about Larry Robinson except 2 things. Do believe he is the coach of the Devils. They win a championship with him. I just remember him as just being really huge as a player. He was like 6'3", maybe 6'4", with the skates on. And I just remember him being really big. And he wasn't really, I never saw him as like a thug player like Dave Schultz, but you just didn't mess with him. And he was physical and he could be nasty. Don't misunderstand. I just think, though, that he had some great hockey talents as a defenseman for the Canadiens, but he was just big. He was just a monster. And he seemed to be a little bit different from the Bobby Orr. Bobby Orr seemed to be a little bit more compact. Robinson just always looked big, and he looked bigger than life. And it could have been because of TV and stuff. Like they always said he was 6'3". He looked like he was 6'7". And he looked like he had about 250, 260 pounds on his frame. He probably played as a game weight, maybe 220, maybe 230. Oh, here's another. I wanted to show you this. Yvon Cornouaille, the back of his card. Let me just read what this says. It's pretty cool. Yvon, it says this: lack of size hasn't hurt speedy Yvon Cornouaille. He is one of the most feared men in hockey on the power play. Most of the goals come when Montreal has a man advantage. All right. So he was 5'7", 160 pounds. And of course, it has the cartoon. Yvon jumped right from junior hockey to the Canadiens. Yvon passa directement du junior aux Canadiens. I'm sorry. I'm reading a little French. Maybe I got away with it there. And here is Rocket Richard in the traditional. That's the typical hockey card I remember as a kid. Not this one. This is more in line with the hockey cards as a kid. Maurice Richard. Just an unbelievable player as well. Hall of Famer. If I do have one more with them, it would be this. Just wanted to point these two guys out. Bryan Trottier. And, of course, the guy in the middle, Marcel Dion, played with the Kings. And he was on a line that scored a lot of goals. And when you ever saw the Kings, they had the most ostentatious uniforms. It was, they had the same colors as the Lakers, that purple and gold. For some reason, it worked for the Lakers. For some reason, to me, that purple and gold did not work for the Kings. Plus, they had this big crown in the middle of their jersey. I liked it from the sense that it didn't have their name Kings on it. They actually had like a logo. But that, again, was a little bit overdone because it just glistened. It was just too much. The purple was just too much, and so was the yellow. It was just a bright, bright yellow. But Marcel Dion was also a small player, as I recall, and he was on a line, and I can't remember the other two players on the line, but they led the league. They weren't that good of a team, the LA Kings. And, of course, you got to remember, Dion came up when the Kings were an expansion team. And then I think later on he is traded and does play with the Rangers later in his career. But I just wanted to point him out. Marcel Dion, he was a scoring machine for a while there with the Kings. Just an interesting player as well. All right. This was what I was planning for my 100th episode. And I was just going to do all things kind of like a hodgepodge. And here's what I mean. I am glad I did the tribute to, obviously, hockey and to Guy Lefleur. I know I don't spend that much time with the NHL. I simply would rather not, since I'm not as versed, not that I'm an expert in baseball, football, or every time I hear expert, that's when I kind of shudder, because I don't think there is anything such as an expert in anything, because we can all learn something new every day. And as I have pointed out on this show a number of times, wow, when I'm doing my research, I'll always be honest with you, or I try to be, and say, wow, I never realized that about this individual or about that time and all the rest of it. Like Guy Lefleur, never realized really what a scoring machine he was. I did realize how great of a player. Well, I shouldn't say that. I just know he was a great player. I never realized how great a player he truly was. And I just thought it was interesting with all the numbers that the Canadiens retired. So that was a little fun. The thing I wanted to point out was this. I was going to point it out in last week's episode, and I completely forgot. So I'm going to do it here. And it's just, I'm going to get to one guy who I've always wanted to spend some time with. And he's still to this day one of my favorite managers of all time. And the reason why he's one of my favorite managers of all time is the fact that he was the only manager who beat the Yankees during their runs in the 50s. Al Lopez. What a great manager he was. I knew he was, but doing some of the research for this program, never realized what a great manager he was. I knew he was a catcher of, let's say, not more defense than offense. Does make the Hall of Fame. Does really make it for his, I do believe, for his ability to manage a club rather than, let's say, his prowess on the baseball diamond. But nonetheless, you make the Hall of Fame. You make the Hall of Fame. And here's the lowdown with this guy. He's just incredible. And I just want to point this out. I know what I wanted to get to. Last week, and this is what I wanted to point out on the show, and this is what I was going to make a little hodgepodge for today's show, the 100th episode, was I was looking and I saw that Bryce Harper stole home plate. And he was the first Philly to steal home in like 40 years. And they did tell me who it was. Like the last players to do it were Larry Bowa and Pete Rose. Bowa did it in 1970. And Pete Rose did it in 1980. That's incredible. But anyway, I thought I had it. I'm going to remember it anyway. Bryce Harper stole, I think, second, third, and I know he stole home last week in a game. Here's what I was looking at. Rose stole 3 bases in a game against the Cincinnati Reds, and the catcher was Dan Werner. And in that game, the Reds actually allowed 5 steals. 3 to Pete Rose. And the reason I went quotes is I was about to say Hall of Famer, and then I realized, nope. But they also allowed 2 steals to this Hall of Famer, Mike Schmidt. So that was a game against the Cincinnati Reds that the Phillies won with Rose stealing, and I believe it was 1980. It was early June, and the Reds got beat by the Phillies 1980. And of course, that was the year that Rose and the Phillies would win their very first World Series in the city of Philadelphia, ending years of frustration. You know, the Phillies didn't get back to the World Series. That was the first time they were back since 1950. And they hadn't been back to the World Series in 1950 since 1915. So you're talking about, and it's amazing that it was the Philadelphia A's who had unbelievable success in the early part of the century, at least the first 3 decades of the 20th century. They were the ones to leave, not the Phillies. Incredible, right? Anyway, the other player that stole home in the last 50 years for the Phillies was Larry Bowa, who would be a teammate with Rose and Schmidt on that 80 championship team. And he did it against Doc Ellis and the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1970. And the catcher that he stole off, or the pitcher he stole off, I always say the catcher included, although the catcher is really not responsible for the stolen base at home, but it was Manny Sanguian. So that was an interesting thing. It took me a while to research it, about an hour using Baseball Reference, but I really enjoy doing it. I just wish I could come up with a system, but I had to let that out. And that's what I was going to do. And I will do this probably on a future show. Just pick up some baseball cards that I've been able to secure, and we'll talk about some of those players. And it's just going to be a random, maybe a couple I'll have planned, because I do want to talk about some great players, some players who I thought were pretty decent or had some good years. Just some fun, just picking them out of a pile and saying, hey, do you remember this guy? Do you remember this guy? Yeah. To this day, I would love to do a show on some of my favorite nicknames, and I will do that. But one guy who stands out was Gomer Hodge, who played 1 year for the Cleveland Indians. And all I can tell you is this. He was Joe Charbonneau before Joe Charbonneau was Joe Charbonneau. And what I mean is this. He was never Rookie of the Year like Charbonneau was in 1980 or 81. But he was a fan favorite with the Indians in 1971. And I remember him coming up against the Yankees as a pinch hitter. And, of course, Gomer Pyle was on in repeats at the time in the early 70s. The success of that Jim Nabors show, Gomer Pyle. And, of course, he was also on the Andy Griffith show. So I think people embrace the name Gomer and Gomer Hodge, plus the fact he was from North Carolina. So I'd like to do a little study. He only played like 1 year. So his stats aren't that big. So maybe I'll do a nice little research on Gomer Hodge, and we'll talk about the footnote players in baseball history. But let me get to the main point. This is Al Lopez, various cards with the White Sox and the Indians. he was just an amazing player. And this is why I got to doing some information on him as well. Al's Aces. Well, that's Herb Score and Early Win. One of the great names. You know, it's funny how names don't dawn on you, but how great for a pitcher's name. You can't make this up as an author. Nobody would respect you as an author. Early Win is the name of your pitcher. The guy is bound to be a winner. It's like naming him. It is just an amazing name. It's like there used to be a baseball player, first baseman, Vic Power. And of course, he had pretty good power for a first baseman. Maybe not Lou Gehrig, maybe not Harmon Killebrew, but he was a very good player with power. I mean, you can't, and I always tell my kids this, that authors just don't pick names out of a hat, that there is symbolism in names. And I just love, and sometimes it can just be deliberate, obviously, and other times it can just be just by luck. But I loved Early Win, and as I got to know, I'm saying it just never dawned on me his name Early Win. Well, when do you want to get that victory? Well, we always want an early win. And he was a great pitcher. Mind you, he was a bull. And this is what I want to talk about right now. Lopez. First of all, let me just I have a new book for my notes. It kind of reminds me of my Indiana Jones type of thing. I just want to give you this. This is Al Lopez's record. Now, Lopez took on the Yankees, and he managed the Cleveland Indians in 1951, and then goes to the White Sox to start the 1957 season. I think what really happened with the Indians, they got old, and he just basically wasn't rehired. You know what? I want to take all that back because I didn't really bother to look into it as much as this. I was more excited about doing an article on Al Lopez, but I can't believe how many years he actually managed the White Sox. He went from 57 to 69. Now, I know that in 66 and 67, he stepped down. Apparently, he had some health issues and then comes back in 68. He was, and this is how Baseball Reference does it. He was their third manager in 1968, had to step down again, and then comes back to be their fifth manager again in 1968. Those White Sox in 68, ready for this, had Eddie Stanky, Les Moss, and Al Lopez. So basically, Stanky went 34 and 45, Moss went 12 and 24, and Lopez went 21 and 26. Now, as I'm reading it, you know that Les Moss was replaced twice in his career by Hall of Fame managers. He was replaced in 1979, even though he had a winning record with the Detroit Tigers. He was replaced when Sparky Anderson became available. And I do recall at the time, it was a great move, but I always felt sorry for Les Moss because he is the second manager and goes 0-2 in 68, and he's the fourth manager and is replaced by a Hall of Famer, Al Lopez, in 1968. And of course, 69, Lopez does manage only for a brief time as he actually stepped down after 17 games because of health issues. Up until then, ready for this, he had a .617 winning percentage with the Cleveland Indians. And he had a .564 winning percentage with the Chicago White Sox. Now, if anybody knows anything about the White Sox, you'll know this. They won in 1959. They go 94 and 60. He won 85 or more games. He won, actually, ready for this? He won 90 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times with the White Sox, and was over 500 in all of his full seasons with them. So he won 85 in 62, he won 86 in 61, and he won 87 in 1960, and he won 82 in 1958. He was over 500 in every year that he managed for a full season. All right. So technically, he was under 500 in 68 and 69. But his last full year at age 56, Lopez won 95 games. And if anybody knows anything about the White Sox, during the 70s, they were really terrible. I know Chuck Tanner kind of willed them in 71 and 72 and a little bit of 73 to some good records. They had Dick Allen, of course, on that team. But they never really challenged. They had to go from 1959 to 1983 before they won any or went into any type of postseason. And I guess their last really flirting with postseason was 1967. Lopez was not their manager, but I think it was Stanky. Yep. Who won 89 games that year, and they finished one game behind the Boston Red Sox. So that was a wild finish in that 67 season. But anyway, I just wanted to take a look at this. The thing that I always recall about Al Lopez was that he was seen as a pitcher's manager, that it seemed that pitchers really, really came to fruition under his tutelage and mentorship. Now, Tommy John, I was reading about Al Lopez. Tommy John thought the world of him. He said he never got on you this way, never embarrassed you, was always very positive, hated, I think, team meetings. But when he told you something, you knew he was serious, and you always wanted to win his approval, even though he had a very easygoing demeanor. He wasn't like a hot, under-the-collar type of guy like Martin or Weaver. Just a very balanced, very just easygoing nature. But under that, he was a great disciplinarian and manager. And that's what John was intimating when I was reading some of the quotes about Lopez. But anyway, here's what I wanted to tell you. Just a quick thing. These are pictures of both Herb Score, and I didn't realize this until I did the research. Herb Score, who started, of course, had a brilliant start to his career, was hit then by Gil McDougall in the eye on a batted ball and was never the same. And, of course, Early Wynn, who would win 300 games exactly at the age of 43 while pitching for Cleveland. Anyway, here's what Herb Score did under Al Lopez in both his stints with the White Sox and with the Cleveland Indians. Score was 42 and 31 with Lopez. He was 13 and 15 without him. Early Win was, ready for this, 87 and 106 under other managers. Now he starts off with Washington, then he goes to Cleveland. Under his watch, ready for this, he goes 185 and 125. He has a 598 winning percentage. And you talk about a stud pitcher who's a horse. Win wins. I'm glad I can be redundant with that. Win wins 20 games 4 times under Lopez. He won 5 times. 5 20 victory seasons under Al Lopez. Okay? 5. And ready for this? Listen to the number of innings pitched. He never threw fewer than 237 well, I shouldn't say that. Threw 110 innings, but he was age 40. All right? But under him, at the age of 39, in 1959, Early Win won 22 games, 10 losses, 3.17 ERA, 255.2 innings pitched, 179 strikeouts. All right? He rallied. The year before, he was 14 and 16 with a 4.13. Then he's pitching his second full year in Chicago under Al Lopez, goes 22 and 10. All right? Unbelievable. Under Al Lopez in Cleveland, he won 20, 23, 17, 23, 17, and in 1956 won 20 games. His only bad ERA year was 1953 at a 3.93 ERA. Now, just because I say two great pitchers with potential, ready for this? He had a guy on the White Sox, Dick Donovan, who won 16 games and led the league in winning percentage. All right. And he was also then put into the bullpen where he goes 6-1 with 3 saves. And the last guy I want to mention, ready for this? Billy Pierce, who was a good pitcher, solid, was 114 and 110 without Lopez. With Lopez, he was 97 and 59. I'll probably continue. And even Tommy John was 57 and 47 under Lopez and was 231 and 184 for the rest of the managers in the major leagues. This is Will O'Toole. I want to thank Howard, and I'm going to leave off with this. Howard, you're the best. Thank you for having me.